So now we've got this part of the sign built. We're going to have a look at the welcome letters across the top. And what I've done is I've downloaded a font that I'm going to use for this. My favorite free font site that I use is called dafont.com. And I found this really nice thin looking one that almost kind of looks like a neon look. It's a little sharp, but I just wanted a really light, thin font. This one's called Atom. This one's free. Grab it for personal use only. Check it out. I'm going to chuck it in here. So let's create some text. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make each of these letters individually with the circle and the torus on them. So let's jump straight into that. So I'm going to make a cylinder as the base for my letter for a start. So let's create primitive cylinder. Now I want a cylinder lying on its side facing forwards. So for this primitive, I select it and go to its orientation. I can change it so it's aiming along the z-axis. I can also use the two small dots that we've got on this primitive to change the size and the depth of it. And let's get this somewhere around this kind of size. If we have a look at the image, so if I have a look at the size of that circle for the welcome, it's about the same size as the size of the Las Vegas font. So that looks kind of about right to me. Now I don't want to move this. I'm going to keep this at the origin, right in the center of my 3D world, because I've got a few other things to make and I want this to stay right in the middle. What I might do though is I might just grab my sign group and just move that straight up. So it's just out the way a little bit, and I'll come back to positioning everything later on. Okay, so here is my cylinder. Let's make it a little bit shallower. Now looking at the cylinder, the default settings, I don't have very many sides on this, so it's looking a little angular and not very pretty. So in the cylinder, I want to go to the rotation segments. That's how many segments go around and make up the sort of curved shape. And I'm going to turn these right up to, I don't know, something like 48. Something that divides nice and evenly by 4. I think it's always good practice in case you need to split things or arrange things. I want it smooth. That's the main thing. Okay, so this is smooth. That's the base of our W for the welcome sign. The next thing I want is something that looks a little bit like this ring of neon light around the front of it. So I'm just going to use a torus shape, which is a donut shape. So let's go create primitive torus, and yeah, that's pretty huge. Let's change the orientation of that torus to Z. And let's use these two little points here to change the radius and the thickness of that torus. And let's get it so it sits just out the front. So I'm just going to drag just on this blue axis. So it's just sitting out the front. And I want it fairly thin. So let's get the thickness down pretty small, and let's pull that radius out a little more. Now looking straight front on, because I haven't moved my cylinder and I've only moved the torus in this z-axis forwards and backwards, they're aligned at the origin, so they're lined up with each other nicely, and that's what I want, so I'm not trying to line things up by eye later on. So let's make this about the same size, just a little smaller than the radius of the base. Again, it's a little bit sharp and clunky looking, this torus, so let's put a whole bunch more segments into this. It's still not very many. Don't be afraid to turn this up fairly high if you need to. I'll go to 80, and that's looking a little bit better. Just looking at this, my cylinder, I can still see little sort of chunky sort of points on this. It's not looking super smooth. Let's just crank this up to 80 as well. So we've got lots of subdivisions, got a smooth looking surface. That's a little better. Okay, so that's good. That's the base and the neon light of this part of the sign built. So the next bit is just building this W in the middle using that Atom font that I downloaded. So let's create some spline text, and let's go into the text and type in a capital W, and let's pick that font if I can find it. It was called Atom. Let's just scrub up here. There we go, Atom. Let's make it light, and let's center this in the middle, Now that should give us a ginormous W. There it is there. Let's pull this down and shrink it. And just shift it back up again. I'm only moving it up and down, not side to side, because I want it to line up with my other geometry. I might just pull it forwards so I can see it. And let's make this a little smaller still. And make sure it's placed in the middle. So if I have a look at that W there, does it look something like my picture? Kind of does. Close enough, I'm happy. So let's extrude that, and that'll be our neon text. So let's create a generator extrude. Let's put our text in that extrude. And what I can also do here, this is supposed to be kind of neon. So let's make the extrude very short. Let's go to the movement section and let's turn that right down to something like 1 or even maybe 0.5. And what I'm going to try, now I don't know if this is going to work, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to see if I can make a slightly curved front on it so it does look a little bit more like a tube rather than just an extruded shape here. So if I go to the cap section, what I want to do is turn on beveling for this extrude that I've made. All I need to do is start turning this value up here, and we can see that those sharp edges on my text, they start to get smoothed off. So I can turn that up, so I've got a little bit of smoothing on there, and I might make the depth of this extrude even smaller. Let's take it down to, maybe it's just 0.1 even. And now what I've got is something that, if we're not too close to it, almost looks like a tube rather than the flat extruded text that we had before. So this bevel function here on the caps, the flat ends, just rounds off the edges of it. I'm just going to put a couple more divisions in there. That's how smooth this curve is going to be. And it's not exactly neon, but it's getting pretty close. And as from a distance, it'll look a little bit like it. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just going to reposition this text curve just a little higher, and that's looking pretty good. So that's the W made. Now, I've got a whole bunch of these letters, welcome, and they're all pretty much the same setup, except obviously they've got a different letter in each one. So here we're going to get a little bit tricky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to group all these elements together that make up the W. So let's go to our create menu, create a null, which is an empty group at the origin. And let's grab all of these pieces here that make up this and drag and drop them into the null. Helps if you drag and drop them onto the null, don't miss. There we go. So now I've got this null. If I pick it up and grab it, that's all these elements here. I'm going to double click the null and call it W for welcome. And that's the first one of these made. So that's looking pretty good. Now, what I could do here as well is maybe just make some simple materials for a starter, just to make this a little easier to see. So I've got some orange and some sort of light neon color. So let's make an orange. So let's command drag our red. So we've got a new material. Double click it. Let's make this orange. Oh, oops, if you're spelling it right. O-R-A-N-G-E. And let's go to the color. And let's just let's change that to RGB, because that makes a lot more sense to me. And I can pull up the green, and now we're getting more of an orangey color, maybe a little darker. And we'll put this on the base on that cylinder. So let's drag and drop that onto the cylinder. Now, I'm going to use a special shader for the W and for this ring around the outside that is going to kind of try and make it look a little bit like neon. So let's duplicate this orange material. So command drag it to one side. Let's double click it, and let's call this neon. Now what's important here is I'm going to use the luminance channel. The luminance channel makes objects look as if they're lit from inside, and they're almost like they're glowing. They don't actually glow, and they're not actually lit from inside, but it gives that look. If I turn this on, my material will go white, because what's happening here is this object is being fully, it's giving the appearance of being fully lit from the inside with white. What I want to do is there's sort of a orangey yellow and a white fall off of lighting around this text. It's a little hard to see there because the picture is not super high resolution, but I'm going to use the luminance channel to create that kind of a look. And I'm going to use a special shader. So let's select the luminance channel, and in the textures tab here, I want to click this little arrow, and I want to pick a texture called a Fresnel, which is got a silent S in it. And what the Fresnel shader does is it shades objects based on a gradient of color. So we've got white to black in our gradient. And how it works is that these white and black colors are mapped onto the surface depending which way we're looking at it. So if the surface of this object is pointing straight towards us, the black color is mapped onto it. As a surface tilts away from us and the side of it is pointing in another direction off to the side, it gets a white color mapped onto it. So what we end up with is a sort of a brightness that increases around the edges, and it almost starts to look like a neon kind of effect. Now I've got an orange material in there still. I could go into my gradient here, double click this little white point, and I could set this as some kind of like a yellow color. And now I'm getting sort of a hot yellow to orangey kind of look going on there. I actually want this almost white, so let's make this brighter white there. And I'm going to make this a little brighter in the middle, not so much orange in the middle. So that is this color here we're dealing with. This we want a brighter yellowy sort of color, and you can play around with this until you get something that you're happy with. Let's go back to that luminance and maybe make that a little more sort of yellow. I'll use RGB, that makes a lot more sense to me. Ooh, that's not the one I want. Something kind of like that. Maybe I'll keep it whiter in the middle there so it's really getting pretty bright. Maybe that's a little bit better. Almost white, but a yellow around the edges. You can play around with this. So what's happening here is in the center color here, that's controlled by this color channel. The rim around the outside, that's controlled by the light end of the luminance Fresnel shader that we can go into. So, let's not keyframe that. That was an accident. That's looking okay for my neon anyway. I'm reasonably happy with that. So let's put that onto the W, the extrude, and let's also put that onto the torus around the outside. So now we've got these really sort of bright, almost neonish looking shaders going on our text here. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so there's our W done. So here was where we get a little bit clever. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this W up, and I'm going to position it where I think it needs to be in the front of my sign here. Now I can change this later on. So let's just start to make this, and we can shift all these things around later on. So there's my W. I'm pretty happy with it there. As I said, my sign is going to be different to this image, but this welcome is sitting pretty much in the middle of the sign. So I'm guessing that I'm probably starting in about the right place. So here's the trick. We need to make sure that we have this W group selected. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold down my Command key and drag this whole group sideways. So that's going to duplicate the group. So I've now got a second one. So here is my second group that's been created. This is going to be E for welcome, W-E-L-C-O-M-E. So let's name this E. And let's go to the extrude. And inside that extrude is the text, which makes up this bit here. All we need to do now is change this to a capital E. And there's our E. So let's do this again. Let's grab that group. Make sure you grab the group and not these individual pieces. We're going to grab this whole group. Hold down your Command key, drag it across to the side. This is going to be the L. So first thing, let's rename that L. Let's go into its extrude and change the text there to L. Make sure you delete the E first. There's our L done. So let's continue doing this. Let's make sure we grab the group, Command drag. This will be C. And if we go to its extrude, let's make that C. And I'm just going to carry on through the rest of these. Grab the group, Command drag the group. That is O. And let's make this one O. Command drag the group. Make sure you're grabbing the group. I almost didn't grab the group then. This is M. Go to the extrude text, change it to M. And we've got one more. Let's grab that final group. And this is the second E. There was an E earlier on. So I'm going to call this one E2 and type in E. Oh, make sure you type in the correct letter, E. There we go. So there's our welcome sign. So that was pretty easy. Now looking at this, some of those letters don't look exactly in the right place. Maybe I need to just select all these text objects. I'm just going to command click all the texts. And maybe I just need to shift those up or down a little bit just to get them in the middle where I'm happy. But this is great. So now that I've got this first group made with all this materials, I was able to just command drag it, and now I've got this collection of groups, and there's our welcome text. So now what we can do again is we can select all of those. We can hit Option G on our keyboard to group them, and I'm going to call this welcome. And now I can just move this entire group of elements around and get them lined up exactly where I want them. I might jump into my front view, hit H on my keyboard to fit everything into the screen, and there's the middle of my group. I can see there's the center of it there. I can line it up on the midline. I know that's going to be pretty much in the middle. So that's looking pretty good.